Back, fellow football fanatics. It's College Football with Sam here, and we have a jam-packed show today. We're going to be going over 4 matchups: Ohio State versus Marshall, Penn State versus Kent State, Virginia Tech versus Rutgers, and also Utah versus Oklahoma State, which I wanted to get to in Touchdown Talk episode 20, but there was just too much to get to, so I pushed it back here. And we're going to start off with Ohio State versus Marshall and Kent State versus Penn State. And then we're going to bring on Adam, Bald Father Betts, who's been with us before about 2 weeks ago to preview Michigan and Texas and talk about his picks for week 2. He's going to come on, and him and I are going to have a little bit of a discussion about the previous few weeks of college football. And then he is going to give his picks for a few games for week 4. So that's the agenda of the show, really. It's as simple as that. And before we get started, as always, I do want to thank the sponsor of the show, Chris Gates, for sponsoring us. And therefore, I am going to tell you about his fitness business. And what Chris Gates does is phenomenal, because what you and I get to do as college football fans is we get to enjoy beer. I don't drink, just for clarification, but I know many of you do. You guys get to enjoy beer. We get to enjoy burgers and fries and hot dogs, potato chips, watch football. We can afford to sit on the couch on Saturday. All of those things factored in, whether it's his 2-day, 3-day, or 4-day fitness plans. You'll have an ability to take control of your weight and your muscle and get in better shape and progress while the college football season progresses. So take this one-time opportunity from Chris Gates. If you sign up using this code, chrisgates.com or chrisgatesfitness.com/college football with Sam, and then another slash after college football with Sam, you get 80% off your first month of being a membership of his fitness group. You also have a private Facebook group. There are challenges that he offers with rewards. And he's a football fan himself. He doesn't just gear his fitness plans toward football fans. He is a football fan himself, a Pitt Panthers football fan. So give him a round of applause or a pat on the back or whatever you want to do for his Pitt Panthers beating West Virginia in what was an awesome comeback win, and also a massive choke job on the part of Neil Brown. Again, sign up today at chrisgatesfitness.com/college football with Sam / to join for only $10 a month on your first month. It's 80% off. After that, it goes up to $50 a month. But again, you have flexible plans that fit a tight schedule. You can enjoy all types of food. And he has workout tutorial videos that can instruct you how to use proper form and prevent injury. Everything's there on his website, chrisgatesfitness.com. So thanks to him. Now, before we bring Adam on here, Bald Father Betts, what I do want to do is get into some of these previews and get him out of the way, because we're going to have previews after he is on from 8:30 to 9. So the show is going to be running past 9. I don't want it to be running too late for you all. So let's just dive right in and talk about Marshall at Ohio State. The Marshall, wow. Okay. Again, for clarification, I'm my own editor and graphic designer outside of Quentin McEnany and Bryson Moore, who, shout out to them, helped me with cover art, and I'm very grateful for them. But I'm often overwhelmed with graphic designing, so where it says live show at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm only live at 8 p.m. Mondays and Wednesdays, just for clarification. But here it goes again. The Ohio State Buckeyes take on the Marshall Thundering Herd this Saturday at noon. A noon kickoff game for the Buckeyes on Fox, where I believe Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt will be announcing is one that would typically be exciting, but once again, Ohio State is playing a non-conference foe that is without a pulse, which makes up for the fact that their Big Ten conference schedule is, well, one of the toughest in all of college football. So you look at this game, and what I see here is another opportunity for Ohio State to continue to get better and to improve and to focus on making sure that their players can be healthy, that they can know the system, that they can continue to grow. What you want to see out of these Ohio State players, because they're so full of experience, but then you have players like Jeremiah Smith who are just awesome and talented and young, is you want to see growth, especially out of the newer guys, the younger players, and you want to see consistency and that experience and veterancy out of the older players. These teams have not met often. In fact, they've only met twice. Ohio State obviously winning both games. It would be an embarrassment, like Michigan losing to Toledo levels of embarrassment if they ever lost to Marshall. Ohio State won 45-7 in 2010. That was the last time these two schools matched up, and that was in Jim Tressel's final year as a Buckeye. What you should be looking for in this game is Ohio State to dominate. So we're not going to talk about too much of, who was the better coaching staff, or, who do you think is going to match up the best with Ohio State's receiver core, or what Ohio State receiver or running back do you think will get the most yards? We're not going to be talking about that. I do want to go through this broad team comparison, though, like we always do, but then really focus on some areas where I think Ohio State should look to dominate in and also get better at. The broad team comparison shows what, everyone really sees, that Marshall is a below average team, even a bad team. Meanwhile, Ohio State is one of the best teams in all of college football. Marshall is about 1.7 points worse than the average college football team per FPI, and a full touchdown, 7 points to be exact points worse than the average college football team per S&P Plus from Bill Connolly. Ohio State is 26.2 points better than the average college football team per FPI. They're fourth nationally there. And in S&P Plus, Ohio State's first right now per Bill Connolly's S&P Plus, and they are rated as 30.6 points superior to the average college football team. This is no surprise. Marshall did get mollywopped at the end. It was a pretty close game for the majority of it by Virginia Tech, and that Virginia Tech team lost to Vanderbilt. And they're a part of the Sun Belt Conference. They don't have a lot of talent, and they did lose some key players from last season. They did. So a 1-1 Marshall traveling to Ohio State, who's undefeated and who's looked dominant in their last 6 quarters of college football. Well, you'd expect Ohio State to be favored big. The numbers in the analytics say that makes sense. And when you look at the points per play margin for these two teams, Marshall has a negative points per play margin of negative 0.189. Ohio State has the nation's number 1 points per play margin of 0.733. So dominance on part of the Buckeyes, as I have said before. Points per play margin really is just an indicator of how dominant you are. Not factoring in strength of schedule, it's only factoring in points per play and how much on average does one of your plays have that much of an advantage over your opponent's plays. So Ohio State in 2 games is just owning their opponents left and right. Marshall is not owning or getting owned, but they're on the losing end. Typically, Marshall's opponents score more points per play than they do. Ohio State scores nearly a whole point extra per play than their opponents do, which is just borderline insanity, even for the weak level of competition they have faced, with Ohio State facing the 127th strength of schedule, a bottom 10 schedule nationally. Even factoring that in, what they have done in dominance and game control is rather impressive. And you look at game control, which adjusts for strength of schedule, unlike points per play margin, and Ohio State's 11th. They're not top 10, which I bet is mostly because of that Akron game. They had a very dominant performance against Western Michigan. But if they continue to improve and play more like they did in week 2 than week 1, they'll rise in game control very quickly. I mean, they have the running backs, they have the quarterback, the wide receivers. Their trenches look better, both O-line and D-line. And then linebackers, corners, safeties, they have it all to control games, and the overall talent and depth as well, on top of quality starters at every position. Marshall has faced the 84th best strength of schedule. That's mainly because they've played Virginia Tech, a Power 4 team, but it's not that tough outside of that. And their game control, again, adjusting for strength of schedule, is 69th. So Ohio State's the far more dominant team, more talented team, which is why I'm only doing this overview and then talking about what Ohio State can improve on, which I think in this game what Ohio State should do is work more on run blocking and work on rush defense. Marshall has produced some pretty impressive running backs under Charles Huff, which makes sense because he was an elite recruiter at Alabama and also a great developer of talent there as their running backs coach. With Ohio State, they have prided themselves, especially over the previous year, but really ever since they hired Jim Knowles, Day is really focused in on this team trying to be physical and trying to dominate on the ground. Well, Ohio State's defensive line, even last year when they had the nation's number 2 defense and it was generational in terms of statistics, did occasionally struggle against the run, particularly in short yardage. So I think this opponent in Marshall's actually a great test for that. You get to see what Marshall can do on the ground, and they have a capable player on the ground. A.J. Turner is their leader in rushing yards with 14 carries for 222 yards. A rushing touchdown, is averaging 15.9 yards per carry. He had 6 carries against Virginia Tech for 103 yards and 8 carries against Stony Brook for 119 yards and a touchdown. Marshall on the season, got to hear this, they have ran for 406 yards, averaging 6.5 yards per carry, 2 rushing touchdowns on 62 carries. They have passed 68 times for 421 yards. They're averaging currently more yards per run attempt, more yards per carry than they are yards per pass. And that disparity grows more so when you take out the 3 sacks that Stone Earl has taken as Marshall's quarterback, and he's pretty terrible. 3 touchdowns, a pick, but he has a 96.3 passer rating because he's averaging 4.4 yards per pass attempt. Between Stone Earl, Braylon Braxton, or Cole Pennington, I don't have a clue who's going to start against Ohio State, and I don't really mind because Marshall is a pretty, well, bad football team. They just are. So what you want to do as Ohio State is dominate them on the ground with Quinshon Judkins, with Travion Henderson, with James Peoples, and then with JT Tuimoloau, with Jack Sawyer, with Kenyatta Jackson, with Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams, and anyone who's starting or in that rotation on the defensive line. You want to stop the run. That's really what you want here. If you're an Ohio State fan, if you're an Ohio State staffer, player, is just total, straight up dominance. That's what you want. So in saying that, I do think Ohio State will dominate Marshall. I think that they will do well in running the ball, stopping the run, and I think obviously passing the ball and defending the pass, they'll do well, as those are the areas where the Buckeyes have the most talent. I think that Ohio State covers. They win 49-3. It's just an easy performance. Ohio State covers that 40-point spread, and the Buckeyes win 49-3. It's really just that simple, and I think that's the result of this game. So, nice way to start out the night is talking about this game, and after this, we're going to be talking about, well, of course, Penn State versus Kent State, Oklahoma State versus Utah, and also Rutgers versus Virginia Tech. That's what we're going to be talking about. And as always, I forgot to mention this, but we will answer Super Chat questions at the end. And by we, I mean myself. Adam Baldfather Betts is not going to be staying with us the whole night. He'll be joining fairly shortly. I don't exactly know when he'll be getting back because he typically works until 8:30, but hopefully he can join us pretty soon. We'll get the ball rolling. And until then, I think I'll just talk about, well, some of my picks really for the week, I think is what I will talk about here. So just let me do that very quickly and adjust for a lot of this. Yeah, I mean, I look at week 4 and it's much better than week 3. That's something I'm very happy for. I wanted to cover a bunch of games, not gonna lie, that I couldn't even get to. And that's how many games I wanted to cover this for this weekend. Is there were so many that I actually kind of put a little too much on my plate, and then I had to draw back today. Like I had to cancel some of the games that I wanted to cover. But you know what? That's at the end of the day, that's okay. Just, is what it is at the end of the day. And again, thanks to Chris Gates for sponsoring us. Make sure to check out chrisgatesfitness.com/collegefootballwithsam / I've tried his workouts. They're very efficient. I love them. They gave me an awesome pump and feeling. And honestly, I actually did his workout while cooking dinner. Like it's so time efficient that you can kind of multitask if you want to. I don't know if that's how it's exactly intended, but my schedule's very busy, so I tried it out and it worked. And I only let people sponsor me, and I only give out advertisements for things, companies, ideas that I believe in, like with Squad Blitz, for example. I believe in Chris Gates Fitness, so please, at the very minimum, check out that link. And thank you all for joining us and being on here. Let me see if he is with us. Yes, he is. He does want to join. I'm going to admit him. We'll get things going here. Okay. Yeah, we're good. I'm gonna bring you in here. Yeah, just hold on a minute. Yeah, just give me 1 second, guys. Okay, there we are. Just got to adjust this, and then we'll be good to go. Yeah, so you guys right now are getting a little sneak peek of what I have to do behind the scenes as you see me adjusting this all around. Okay, I think, let's see if I can just get this down a little bit. Okay. Yep. Yes. Welcome in,
Good
Adam.
news.
How are you doing?
Hey, good. Good to be back. Good to be back. Thanks for having me, Sam. Yeah, doing well. Season's going well so far. So, Bald Father Bets, we're at 60 units won, 40 units lost, and 1 unit pushed on the season. So, 32 and 18 in college, and 28 and 22 and 1 in the NFL. So, right at that 60% winning margin, where that's kind of where you need to be if you're going to be elite in terms of against the spread. Betting anything above 54% is positive. And then if you can hit that 60% clip, that's where you're doing really well. So for an average better, if your unit is $100 and you're laying, minus 110 means you have to bet 110 in order to win 100. If you're doing that each time, you've netted a profit of $1,600 following
Wow.
alongside of us at Bald Feather Bets. So it's been a good season so far, and it's only week 4 coming up in college and week 3 in the NFL. So hopefully we can continue to progress. But it's also been super fun. The season's been super fun. The interaction's been fun. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's just been a fun season so
Oh,
far.
I agree that it's been a fun season. I've barely caught any of the NFL because I don't have the time to, but I do think that it is a fun season. Um, I didn't I haven't bet any money still, but I did like I did last year picks where I just picked like spread and winner just to see like what would happen. I hit just under 500, just under.
That's it's okay. That's a
Yeah.
lot of when you start out. That's where most people are. It takes a little bit of time to kind of. You have to. One of my biggest advices for people is the eye test, which the College Football Playoff Committee uses. Don't ever use that when you are betting. Very very seldomly bring that in. And last week's outcome has nothing to do with the next week's outcome. It's all about matchups. It's all about coaching matchups, scheming matchups, talent level matchups, and that type of stuff is actually mainly done. That analysis is mainly done outside and independent of what happens on the field. And I think maybe you guys, I know we're going to be looking at 4 games today. I think you guys will see that in my picks that I have against the spread for those 4 games.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So, let's get the ball rolling here. What have you thought about the first really 3 weeks of the season and where everything stands, just really quickly before we get into
Yeah,
our picks?
uh, and to be honest, to me, there hasn't been that many surprises. I think I've been a little surprised at how dominant the SEC has been. I'm again, we don't do future bets. I don't bet on what's going to happen 8 weeks from now, but I am pretty confident that the SEC is going to end with at least 5 teams in the college football playoff. And I actually have it at 6 right now. If it ended up being at 5 due to parity, things that end up happening, yes, all these really good SEC teams kind of end up playing each other as the year goes on. Like I even think there's a world where Georgia doesn't make it just based on how difficult their schedule is. I don't think that will happen, but that world exists. It is something that is in the cards that could happen. There's a world where Alabama doesn't make it just based on how difficult their schedule is. But I've been a little surprised at how dominant the SEC has been, how dominant they've looked. Um, the other one that has really surprised me is I know you have a lot of Michigan followers. I've been very surprised at Michigan's coaching staff and just kind of the lack. We've talked about it. You and I have texted about it. Just kind of the lack of identity, almost the lack of I when Sharon Moore filled in for Harbaugh during that 3-game stretch, the question I had was, Harbaugh was with the team all week. Harbaugh was game planning all week. It was just game day that Harbaugh wasn't allowed to be there. It wasn't like for those 3 weeks he wasn't allowed to be in the facility. He was all the game prep and everything happened with Harbaugh.
Yeah.
And so I questioned a little bit like, okay, how much of this was Harbaugh or how much of it was Moore? And I pointed to the Penn State game where you could clearly see, hey, Michigan completely changed their game plan because they realized they were going to lose that game if they continued to go the way that they were going to go. And then
Yeah.
they handed the ball off the entire rest of the game, never threw a pass, right? A la Mac Jones versus the Buffalo Bills. But the I'm starting to think more and more that was designed, that was Harbaugh. And maybe he got word to someone who got word to more, hey, stop throwing the ball. You're going to hand it off every single time. Penn State's interior defensive line cannot contend with your interior offensive line. And then even the one time where JJ McCarthy went to roll out on a 3rd down to throw a pass, he rolled out, pass wasn't there, cut back inside, ran it upfield and got the first down. And I'm starting to think more and more that was the influence of Harbaugh versus being the influence of Moore, because I've been pretty disappointed with the Michigan coaching staff. We talked about it with the Texas game. I don't think there's a world where Michigan gets that win, because I think we talked about the 2 ways it could go. Track meet, Texas wins every time. Dirty, nitty gritty dogfight. The problem I was at the game and I was kind of surprised that when the players were all out on the field, kind of standing next to each other, Well, Texas was just bigger, and we already knew they were faster, and then Texas was bigger. So I don't think, even in a dogfight, I don't. I think Texas wins it most of the time.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, Michigan didn't even try to make it a dogfight, which was kind of the only way that they were going to win that game. They had
Yeah.
it just didn't. The coaching at Michigan has been very surprising. The things I think that have surprised some other people that haven't really surprised me is we've talked about it. We both thought USC was going to beat LSU. Um, I'm still pretty kind of firm on where I think USC ends the season. I haven't been surprised by Oregon's struggles early because of the significant drop off that I think you have from Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel. I was on Oregon last week to kind of get it corrected against Oregon State. Oregon State was decimated when Smith went to Michigan State. I think you and I both agree Smith and that entire coaching staff as a whole is one of the best in the Big Ten. So that's such a loss for Oregon State. There hasn't been as many other things I think that maybe have surprised a few other people that have surprised me in that nature. I have been a little bit taken back at how good Boise State has been, especially when they set up the whole offseason for Malachi Nelson to win the starting job. He didn't win the starting job, and then they've still been pretty dominant. Usually when you set up an offseason for someone to win it, they don't win it. That's not a good sign. But Boise State's been good. They look like that Group of 5 team. I know Memphis beat Florida State, but I mean, who cares?
Yeah,
Florida State's they're terrible. They're terrible. And I think Boise State's that Group of 5 team that at the end of when you truly compare resumes and you look at how close the loss was to Oregon and how I think Oregon will finish the season, I think so far, and I think they will end up being probably the most deserving Group of 5 team at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think that especially if Oregon does well, that absolutely makes sense, especially given their star running back. And I mean, honestly, especially if they beat, I think they play Washington State and they may play Oregon State too. I forget, but if they beat both of those teams as well, that's like a huge resume boost because they're not Group of 5 yet. They're like going that way, obviously, but they still have some. They were Power 5 last year, so
we got a resurgence of the Pac-12, Sam. What are you talking about? They resurrected the conference.
A resurgence of the Pac-12, exactly. All right. Well, I agree. The SEC has been dominant. Do you want to start out with Tennessee and Oklahoma? Speaking of that dominance,
let's do it. Right, we got ABC primetime, game day, all that stuff. So I was kind of joking because I think. Or I was laughing because we have a couple picks tonight, and I know you got you have a Tennessee following, you got a big Nebraska following, I don't know how popular some of my picks are going to be tonight. So this line came out at 7.5, Tennessee minus 7.5. It's regressed now down to Tennessee minus the 7, and even some books like FanDuel had it at 6.5 last night. I can't remember if they're back up to 7 or not. This game is a very emotional game for both sides, right? You have both Brett Venables and Josh Heupel were fired from Oklahoma. Josh Heupel more for legitimate reasons. The offense was not really clicking. Brent Venables is one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. Bob Stoops fired him so he could hire his brother and rescue Mike Stoops and give him a job, which ended up being a horrendous decision. You could also argue how much of Josh Heupel last year versus Lincoln Riley's first year has to do with Baker Mayfield coming in at quarterback and how much of it has to do with the scheme. But I don't think anyone would argue that Lincoln Riley was a better offensive mind than Heupel was. Heupel's had this one circled for since he knew Oklahoma was coming to the SEC and the schedule got released. And Oklahoma has had this one scheduled since they knew this was going to be their first game in the SEC. And everyone keeps talking about, oh, Texas is good, Texas is good, Texas is good. OU's going to get crushed in the SEC. We talked about it a little bit last time. OU has been the better program since both teams joined the Big 12. And when you look at it, they have significantly more Big 12 titles, national championships, all of that stuff. So, well, when they were both part of the Big 12, they both had one national championship. But over the history of time, OU has more. I think that Oklahoma will keep this one close, just due to the emotion, due to how badly they want it. I don't think it has. I may pick against OU the very next week when they're at Auburn. But in this game, I think I have Oklahoma plus the 7.5, and we're putting 2 units on it. Now, in terms of who I think ends up winning the game, that talk about track meet dogfight thing. So the track meet, Tennessee wins it every time, check mark. So
Yeah.
OU is going to try and make this thing a dogfight. And kind of like where Michigan, should have tried to make that thing a dogfight. The problem is Texas kind of was like, okay, make it a dogfight. We'll still win. I think that Tennessee is ready for a dogfight. I
Agreed.
think Tennessee is a lot more physical than people are giving them credit for. This is not 2022 Tennessee, where if they don't score 55 points, they can't win the game. They have serious talent at edge rusher. They have talent on the defensive line. I think they are gettable in the secondary, but the question is whether or not Oklahoma's offensive line, which was suspect coming into the year and now is very injured, whether they have the ability to actually hold up against that pass rush, give Jackson Arnold the time to make those throws and win the game, which I don't think they ultimately will. I think this thing is close, and I think Tennessee gets a 28, 24, 31, 27, 24, 21 type win. It's a dogfight. It goes the exact way that Oklahoma wants it to go, and they still lose the game because Tennessee is physical. Tennessee will hit hard. They're ready for a dogfight, and I continue to be impressed with the most impressive performance for Nico, in my opinion, is still the bowl game last year when he put
Yeah.
up
Oh, yeah.
35 on Iowa's defense. Iowa's defense was very legitimate last year. Tons of NFL talent. Phil Parker is one of the best coordinators. He was going up against a true freshman quarterback, really first time playing in a big game like that. Iowa didn't have near the amount of opt-outs that Tennessee did, and Tennessee dominated him. Nico looked amazing, some of the throws he made. So far this year, I don't think he's been tested as much. I think he will get tested in this game. I think you'll see some mistakes, but ultimately Tennessee has the kind of the grit to, okay, OU, you want to play this game dirty, let's play it dirty, and they still get the win. That's how I feel. How about, what are your thoughts?
I do think that Tennessee is not only better at quarterback, they're also better at running back and then O line, D line, because Oklahoma's also banged up on the D line too. I mean, they're banged up kind of everywhere. Wide receiver, they're banged up. Burks is healthy, but I don't know how many others are healthy. I mean, he's leading the team by a mile in receiving yards because they're so hurt there. I would look to, because I released a prediction video for this already. I think Tennessee's going to win, and I think they're going to win big. I can't see Oklahoma hanging with them when I know that they've played a tougher strength of schedule than Tennessee has. But Tennessee is I forget what it was. They're top 5 in points per play margin, and they've already ran for 1,000 yards on the season. It's insane. And I don't think that if you're Oklahoma, with the O-line that you have and the questions consequentially in the ground game and pass pro that you have, and Jackson Arnold has a 134 passer rating, that's not much higher than, let's say, Cade McNamara at Iowa. I have a hard time seeing it be close. But the path for it to be close is, like you said, you make it a rock fight. Imaliava has several turnovers. Tennessee, maybe because they haven't faced a defense like this since that Iowa game, they get kind of stonewalled, and Oklahoma's able to really do a good job. But, I mean, Oklahoma, it's looked like everything's been hard for them in all 3 of their games, and for Tennessee, it's just effortless. We can do whatever we want. We can run, we can pass. And James Pierce Jr. is going to be a problem off the edge against any offensive lineman that depressingly has to block him.
There's a good chance Oklahoma does get Nick Anderson back this week at wide receiver, which I think will help. They're going to have to run quick passes, screen game, etc. And between Burks and Anderson, they have the speed to do that. But Pierce is going to be an absolute problem. And what Jackson Arnold hasn't been able to do so far this year is avoid the disastrous play. He's thrown in, even in the Tulane game. I mean, he's thrown the picks. They've been in the lead. They've had but then he'll come back and he'll just make a bonehead play, throw a pick. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see Hawkins Jr. the backup quarterback, because he's extremely athletic. He came in. Casey Thompson came to OU after being in all sorts of places, right? Being at Texas, being at Nebraska, being at FAU. And he came thinking that he had a true opportunity to not only be the backup quarterback, but compete and win. He's third string because Hawkins, the true freshman, has unseated him for that backup quarterback. And they trust Hawkins. And when you see Hawkins play, I mean, it's not Kyler Murray, but it's like, okay, this is the closest thing OU's had to Kyler Murray since he's been there in terms of that speed. And I think maybe in some third and short situations, because he can absolutely also throw the ball, they may bring him in order to get some change of pace. And that's just where I think, games are only 60 minutes. One of the dumbest quotes in the history of football, sorry, it's from Bo from Michigan, is I never lost a game, I only ran out of time. Well, I'm sorry, but the game is 60 minutes. That's how that is. So you did lose. So if teams have a game plan that doesn't allow the more superior team to really start to click on what they want to do until the last 20 minutes, last 15 minutes, whatever it is, they can keep it close, which is, I think, what OU does is they throw everything into the coaching, which I do think Venables and the staff is a good everything into the scheming. And I do think Venables and staff are good. And they keep this thing close enough to then maybe try and steal a win at the end. I just don't think they can. I think Tennessee is too good. I think they're ready for a rock fight. I think they're ready for any way this game goes. And I think Heupel wants to win this game more than any other game he's ever coached in his career, maybe other than Alabama 2022 when they got him up in Neyland.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be fascinating for them to bring in the younger quarterback to try and run. I didn't even know that he was the second stringer, but granted, I'm more so versed in the Big Ten. Their leading rusher is Jackson Arnold.
It's Arnold.
Leading rusher. It's just
it's not designed runs. It's because the offensive line can't hold up, and he scrambles out, and then he has to try and do something and run. It's been a patchwork offense all year.
That's a disaster.
It's not when you're going up against the edge rushers that Tennessee has. It's gonna be tough, which is why I think you're gonna see Hawkins in some third and short, second and short, maybe even a 4th and 1 situation, just to try and add some sort of element that, okay, Tennessee we have to account for this guy on the field. Whereas when Arnold's on the field, okay, maybe you have to account for a scramble a little bit, but you don't have to account for speed. You can pretty much play the defensive game plan that you would play against a pocket passer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we move on, what do you think of the over under? Do you think it's a pretty low scoring game? Do you think it's pretty balanced, or do you think that it's high scoring?
I think OU keeps it close, and the only way OU keeps it close is there's some turnovers mixed in there. So I would lean to the under. I don't do totals. We don't do totals at Bald Feather Bets. I prefer to look at the two teams. I've tried to do totals before. I'm just not good at it. So I've always stuck with the line. But if OU is going to cover the spread, or in any world where they're able to win, this thing isn't high scoring. Because if this thing is high scoring, Tennessee won, Tennessee covered the spread, and Tennessee probably has some of the fans headed to the parking lot by fourth quarter.
Yeah, which is ultimately what I think will happen. Do you think that Illinois can upset Nebraska? What's your thought on that Friday night top 25 matchup?
I know you got a bunch of GBRs you have some GBRs that are your dedicated fans too. They come to every live chat. Yeah, you got some real big Nebraska people. I do not think Bielema gets the win, because Bielema in close games just finds ways to throw things away. He almost did it against Kansas. And you remember I was big on Illinois against Kansas. I'm very low on Kansas. I was low on Kansas to start the year, which is why I had Illinois not only covering the spread but getting the win. I have Illinois covering the spread here, so it came out at 9, got all the way up to 9.5. We grabbed it for 1 unit in Ball Father Bets when it was at 9. It's come down now to even 8.5, and then there was some 7.5s out there. So showing you that there's some pretty big money. Usually this early in the week, that means that you're getting some pretty professional play on Illinois. The thing I look at with Nebraska is the Colorado game. And there is a caveat to this because Colorado may very sneakily have a better defense, like twice as good as it was the previous season because it was one of the worst defenses in college football. It's very quietly they may have that, but they won that game 28-10. They scored 28 points in the first half, and one of them was off a pick six. They were shut out offensively in the second half of that game. Um, I I think Illinois knows how much ever better Colorado's defense is. I think Illinois has a superior defense to Colorado. I think Illinois has also had this one kind of circled. I think as good as Raiola is, as much as he wants to be a clone of Patrick Mahomes, I think that he still has that true freshman, game that is coming, and I think this one could be it. Do I think Illinois gets the win? No, I don't. I trust Rule over Bielema 10 times out of 10. I think Rule is an elite coach. I think he's an excellent coach. He has a very strict model that he sticks to when in terms of rebuilding teams. Year two is where he makes that really big jump, and then year three is where he truly competes for the conference. So I do think there's some losses upcoming for Nebraska. I don't think it's this one, but I don't think this is a blowout like I think some of the Nebraska faithful think. And the other thing about that Colorado game, which is what a lot of people point back to, so I was on Colorado plus I think it was 7.5. I had 7.5, I think, before the game started. That's what we gave out at Bald Father Bets. And I knew within the first 5 minutes, oh, this is lost. And you could just tell by the atmosphere in the stadium how badly they needed that win. I mean, the balloons and it was pandemonium. It was like the state fair for the state of Nebraska for that.
The pick six was the epitome of this is over.
It was done. I mean, the photo too of Shador just kind of standing there, like looking over. It was done. You could tell it was like, okay, yeah. In no world does Nebraska lose this game. And bussing with the boys, they literally were at Texas, Michigan. Then they got on the plane. They flew there. Every Nebraska faithful came back. It was just like this was it. This was the game where we're finally back. We're finally good. We're here. We're competing for a Big Ten, which I absolutely think Nebraska will do all of those things. I just don't think they're at a point yet where they start blowing out competition that has skill. And Illinois has skill. I think, like I said, I think Illinois really upgraded the quarterback position from last year to this year, which was one of the main reasons I was on them against Kansas. I think that they have a good defense. I think that they're much closer to 2022 Illinois than they are to 2023 Illinois.
I completely agree.
I just don't trust Bielema in a close game late. I never will. I mean, the amount of times that guy mismanaged the clock at Wisconsin, the amount of times that guy gave wins away when he was at Wisconsin, his tenure at Arkansas was similar. They just weren't as good as they were up at Wisconsin. I can't trust him to win a game late. So I think Illinois keeps it close. I think they keep it within the 9. Those standalone Friday games could be kind of weird in college football. It's a short week too, but to get able to get the win against Nebraska, I don't, and that's because I trust Rule over Bielema.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, I have Nebraska covering the spread, but winning 31-16 with Nebraska because of their better offensive line, being able to score touchdowns in the red zone. Illinois will just kick field goals. That's kind of my thought process. So it'll be competitive in my mind for much of the game. But if Illinois does have a path to win, it's Altmaier throwing to Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin and getting behind the defense, and then Raiola showing up and having, like what you said, a true freshman game, and then Miles Scott, Xavier Scott, Rosiek at linebacker. Like, that defense forces some turnovers and makes it ugly. But I've known Bielema mainly because I'm younger, only from his time at Illinois, where he's owned Minnesota in some close games. He beat Penn State in 2021, but I don't
should have beat Michigan in 2022.
Oh yeah, they should have. They should have. There was like a total OPI, and I'm typically not one who like blames the like refs or anything like that, but I rewatched that game, that highlight. I'm like, out of all the things where people say, "Oh, Michigan got away with this," it was clear they got away with that pick. Like,
that one was
that was egregious.
That yeah, and I mean too, Illinois has that one circled, right? The Michigan game
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah.
upcoming for sure. They have that one circled, but this one on the road, Nebraska, it's Rule. Rule and that coaching staff is I think the answer. And what you said, the 31-16. If Raiola doesn't make a mistake, Nebraska's winning and they're covering the spread. This is very much a Rayola makes at least one mistake in this one that keeps Illinois in it, keeps it close, and they're just not able to make that pull away late. But I don't necessarily know if at any point in this game you're going to be sitting there thinking to yourself, "Oh wow, Illinois could win this." It's just going to be one of those things where you're like, "God, why can't Nebraska just put them away and pull ahead?" It'll be kind of one of those.
Oh, okay. That'll make Nebraska fans mad because their history with close games is pretty frightening. But I think Rule is turning that around. And speaking of turnarounds, we've arrived at USC Michigan, where Michigan's trying to turn around their season. That's why they're starting Alex Orji now. And USC's trying to turn around the entire perception and identity of their program. Who do you think wins this? It's at Michigan, which is probably the only reason why I and most people think Michigan has a chance, even if they end up picking USC.
Yeah, so I have picked all three Michigan games this year, and I was so close to being 3-0 as I had them minus the 21 last week, and then they gave up those last second scores when they didn't need to, and they would have been up 42-3 if Davis Warren didn't finally prove me wrong. Remember, I've been saying this whole time that I didn't think Davis Warren was that bad. I just thought that the coaching and the scheme, all that stuff was terrible. Both of them came together. They did run the ball more than they passed. We talked about that. But Davis Warren just made some absolute horrendous games that kept this thing within the margin of the spread, and then they didn't cover. So I'm 2-1 on in terms of going on Michigan games. I bet on Fresno State, and we had Texas the following week. We had Michigan last week because again it was one of those kind of buy low points on Michigan. I thought people were way overreacting to things. I thought the Texas Michigan game was a lot more about kind of how good Texas was and then how poor the coaching was for Michigan versus Michigan's really bad. So I am once again we are going to be on Michigan at Oddfather Bets in terms of our buy low point. We took them plus the 7 as soon as the line came out. It has now dropped down to 5.5. We don't bet money lines at Bald Feather Bets. We stick with getting points when you can get it. We stick with the spreads. That way you always have that minus 110, that minus 10 juice. But I also think Michigan will win the game. This is my last chance though that I'm trusting more in the staff. There was a few things I saw last week. You and I have talked about Mullings needed to be established as the every down back. I think he is established now as the every down back. He's the one who's going to carry the rock most of the times. He's that physical runner that Michigan needs to just wear teams out. And then you give the ball to Donovan Edwards with fresh legs and boom, 95 yards touchdown. So I like that. Where I think Michigan is gettable and Michigan will continue to be gettable all year, unfortunately, is the secondary, which is a difficult thing to be kind of weak in against a USC team with Lincoln Riley, offensive genius, very good passing game, Miller Moss, very accurate. Will Johnson will do what he needs to do. But again, that's that Wink Martindale scheme where you have one corner, your number one corner is going to play man, and then the rest of your secondary is playing zone. I think Lincoln Riley is kind of foaming at the mouth for that one. I just don't think that everyone is now just given a check mark to USC's defensive line and USC's offensive line.
That's a big mistake.
It's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. I think South Carolina put up 200 or 250 yards rushing against LSU.
Yeah, and a lot of it was big plays and without a passing game.
Exactly. So Lenora Sellers goes down at halftime with an ankle injury. Then they have to bring in Robbie Ashford, who's never been able to throw a pass more than 10 yards his entire life. And LSU is still giving up big gaps in the running game. So, and then on top of that, LSU, they did get the running game going a little bit in the second half, but I mean, they just still haven't really been able to run the ball the way that they need to. I think people are overvaluing the offense and the defensive line turnaround at USC. That has nothing to do with D'Anton Lynn. You and I've talked about. I think he's top 5 defensive coordinator in college football. I think that staff is excellent on that side. But in terms of the personnel that they have, this game is not a game where I think, okay, track meet, yes, USC wins. Dogfight, USC is like, okay, yeah, we're ready for that. I definitely don't think USC is ready for a dogfight.
No.
I think that it goes dogfight, and I think Michigan gets a win somewhere in that 23-20, 21-17, 21-20 type range.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Michigan should win, and that's what I said in my preview and prediction. And I picked USC to win 27-26 because I think that they have that, like you said, edge in pass offense to Michigan's pass defense. And I don't know if Alex Orji can throw, how well he can throw. So I just assumed that Michigan will drive in between the 20s, kick a lot of field goals, get some touchdowns, and USC will win close. But I do have this feeling, and I'm not, predicting it, not expecting it, but I do think there is a chance that if USC isn't ready for a dogfight and Michigan just runs for hundreds of yards, that could it could get. I'll be careful because I don't think that Michigan's secondary is strong enough to hold USC back, but it could get unlike in the Texas game where I didn't see a scenario of Michigan blowing out Texas. It was only Texas blowout, Texas close win, Michigan close win. If Michigan's staff comes together, which is a big if, and Orji is not just a good runner but also a better passer than Warren, and the ground game's working, Michigan could win and just get 35 minutes of TOP and more than cover the spread.
I mean, they could get 40 minutes of TOP with the quick offense that Lincoln Riley runs. That goes 3 and out a few times. Michigan has 6-7 minute drives back to back after a few three and outs from USC, and then all of a sudden USC's looking up the scoreboard. They're way behind, and they almost have to abandon their running game, which Lincoln Riley does not like to abandon the running game. Usually, even down 14-21, he continues to do it. But against USC, if they're already against Michigan, if they're already dominating time of possession, that's going to be difficult. One of the things I'm keying in on though is the status of Colston Loveland.
Oh yeah.
So Michigan needs to abandon ever throwing the ball downfield because their wide receivers are terrible this year. And Loveland is the equalizer in terms of 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, where the defense at least has to respect a rollout and a 5-yard pass from Orji. If Loveland's not in there, I don't know if D'Anton Lynn respects it at all. I think he sells out to stop the run every time it's 3rd and short, and then you're going to kind of force Michigan's hand to try the wide receivers. And I just don't think they have it this year. I just don't. Texas's secondary is a lot better, but I was, being at the game, kind of having that all 22 view, right? I was floored at how it wasn't just there's little separation, or they can't get separation. There was zero separation from it, zero whatsoever. And Texas is fast. I think they're the fastest team in the country, but there was no separation whatsoever. And that was I know Michigan doesn't historically, and under the kind of this regime, dating back to Harbaugh, they don't really recruit the wide receiver position. That isn't something that they're big on. Their offensive line, running backs, tight ends, that's how they run that offensive scheme. It's worked really well for them. It allows you to game control. It allows you to frustrate teams. But without Loveland, it's going to be really difficult to kind of, make that step up. So I think if he can go at all, even 75%, 80%, I think he's going to go. The reports this week seem kind of back and forth as to really if he's going to be able to do that. But without that, I struggle if Orji's going to have that outlet where he can actually make a play.
Yeah, it sounds like he is. It's better than initially expected, but you don't know what that means. That could mean he's out for a week or two as opposed to a month.
Because Michigan's since Harbaugh's been there, they don't give you a lot of indication on injuries,
No.
prior to a game. They're not big about being upfront about what the injury situation is of a player. They keep it very close to the vest, which if I was a coaching staff, I'd do the same thing. I don't know why you'd want to give your opponent any sort of indication as to what it is they need to prepare for or not prepare for. But I'm curious if he's going to be able to get back from that one and truly compete. But I hope he does, because obviously we're taking Michigan. But he looked very gingerly when he came off the field last week. So we'll see. But I do want to say, we talked about these first three games. None of the Oklahoma game is a 2-unit pick. The Illinois and the Michigan game, those are 1-unit plays for us. It's not like, oh wow, lock, step, done, 10 units, this is over, no chance. These are still just 1 units, and then for Oklahoma, because it's a primetime game, that one's going to be 2 units. But I can see all three of these, like we've talked about. I can see a world where Illinois steps on the field and they're not ready for Rayola and Nebraska, and it's 28-0. I can see a world where Michigan steps on the field and everything we've talked about with the coaching staffs is still the same. Orji can't complete a pass. He throws 2 picks. USC wins 35-10.
Yeah.
And I can see a world too where Tennessee steps in and Oklahoma's not ready for it, just like we talked about. And Nico is everything everyone thinks he is, and he's a future round 1, pick 1 quarterback, and ends up winning the Heisman in his time at Tennessee, and they win the game, 42-28. All those exist.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I think last note on the Michigan USC game, what interests me is really seeing like USC's physicality, and also the fact that as I said in my video today, giving 5 reasons why Michigan will win, I predicted USC, but I like to look at things from all the angles. It's almost impossible to fix a unit that is as bad as USC's defense was last year in 1 year. And when you look at the numbers, let me pull up some of these numbers real quick, and then we'll get to Utah versus Oklahoma State. When you
game of the week, by the way, in my opinion, Utah Oklahoma State.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's the game of the week. The winner of that game will be in the Big 12 title game, barring injury. And it's the first almost pre-college football semi qualifier that you have, because the Big 12 will not get 2 teams in the playoffs. So you have to win the Big 12 in order to get. And if you win that game, you're in the playoff as long as you don't get injured. Or excuse me, you're in the Big 12 championship game as long as you don't get injured.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. You look at USC's defense, and on the surface, they allow only 10 points per game. You have to get 30.6 yards on their defense to score a single point. They only allow 0.171 points per play. Those are all top 20. But then you look at total defense, they allow over 300 yards. They actually allow more yardage than Michigan has per game. And they haven't faced an offense even close to Texas, 305 yards per game. Their opponents average 5.2 yards per play on their defense. It has been the red zone stops and holding teams to field goals and shutting out Utah State, who ran for about 4 yards per carry on them. And I can see a world where USC wins. That's why I'm predicting it to happen. And I have more faith in Lincoln Riley and his staff than Sharon Moore and Michigan's. But I don't think that USC is just going to shut down Michigan's rushing attack.
No, I don't either.
Michigan could and should in this game. What they should do is, pass a little bit to their tight ends, but really do what they did against Penn State last year. Really test that D-line.
Exactly what I was getting ready to say. It should be the Penn State game plan 2.0.
Yeah, and what you do is, typically only rush 4 and test their O-line and their run game and just try and stop the pass, because that's their threat, and something that I think USC will beat Michigan on many times, even if they're really scheming things up. Let's talk about the game of the year, though. or game of the week, according
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
Utah versus Oklahoma State. The spread's really, really tight on this one. It opened up
Yeah.
with Oklahoma State being favored, but then it was announced that Rising was healthy, so now Utah's the favorite.
So it was the other thing. Fun fact about this one: the combined age of these quarterbacks is higher than the combined age of some NFL games of the quarterbacks because they're both seventh-year seniors. So that's cool. We live in that world of college football now. We have seventh-year seniors going off against each other. So yeah, it came out Oklahoma State minus the 1.5. Rising practice. People thought, okay, Rising's going to play. It changed to Oklahoma State plus 1.5, got to Oklahoma State plus 2, all the way up to Oklahoma State plus 2.5, and it's kind of settled in that Oklahoma State plus 1.5, Oklahoma State plus 2 range. Also, I think you had some pretty significant money early come in on Utah. Utah's sharps love Utah. Professional bettors love Utah. They love Whittingham. They love the fact that they don't turn the ball over, the fact that they can be reliable in terms of kind of what you predict that Utah will do. Utah ends up doing. There's not a lot of variance in that based on what they do statistically and then what the outcome ends up being. This one, like I said, these two teams need to win this game because Kansas State is still there. UCF is quietly there. I think people are finally starting to realize like, oh, Gus Malzahn might have himself a team this year with the scheme he likes to run. But this game is so important to both. Boone Pickens Stadium, I've been to Boone Pickens Stadium several times, is a very underrated home field advantage. They get very loud there. In terms of size, it's not as big as you would think. The paddle people up against the wall next to the benches and right there, you don't realize how close they are. It's very loud. I've never seen another stadium in college football where the fans are that close to the opposing bench. It is an underrated environment. Utah is new to the Big 12. It's the first time that this staff is coming in and playing in Stillwater. So the whole logistics of, where do we stay, where do we sleep, all that stuff. What's the locker room like, things like that. That's all new to Utah. But the biggest reason we are on Oklahoma State, if you guys couldn't tell, we are on Oklahoma State plus the 2 for 4 units. The biggest reason I like this one a lot. The biggest reason that we're on Oklahoma State for this one is the Cam Rising injury. So he hurt the finger of his throwing hand, and he dislocated the finger on his throwing hand, and he ultimately had to have stitches on it. That's for anyone who's never tried to throw something or hold something or shoot a basketball or throw a baseball or throw a foot. When you don't have the correct feel in your fingertips, things are off. And Oklahoma State does not really need to rely on Alan Bowman to win the game. They need Bowman to not make a mistake because they're going to hand the ball off to Ollie Gordon. The defense is going to load the box, which is what every single defense has done to them thus far this year, which is why Oklahoma State hasn't got the running game going, because every single team loads the box and says, oh, we're going to make Bowman beat us. Well, Bowman has beat them. They should have lost the Arkansas game, no question. That's a choke job by Arkansas. You look at the total
Pittman.
by Pittman. You look at the total yards of Arkansas, total yards of Oklahoma State, all that. I mean, it's ridiculous, the discrepancies that you have there. Utah does not have the same offensive system that Arkansas does. They are not a spread you out. They do not have a Taylor Green at quarterback who can really run wild. Cameron Rising is mobile. He's less mobile coming off the ACL tear, but he is mobile. But he is not a mobile option QB who's going to beat you with his speed. Utah needs Cam Rising to win the game. That is how Utah beats people, with Cam Rising. He's a very good quarterback. It's why they were so good 2 years ago. It's why they were good the previous year. When he went down against Penn State in the Rose Bowl 2 years ago, the game was over virtually. Yes. And when they tried to play Oregon last year without Cam Rising, I mean, the game was over ugly. It was ugly. It was over after the first 5 minutes. I don't think Oklahoma State does anything like that to them. I think this is a epic game. I think it's close. I think Oklahoma State gets a win late. And again, no futures bets from us at Bald Feather Bets, but just a prediction. I think they meet again in Dallas for the Big 12 title game, and I think Utah beats Oklahoma State in Dallas. But this one in Stillwater, Mike Gundy's one of the best ATS coaches in college football. He covers spreads. The fact that Oklahoma State is now an underdog on this one, I like them. I like the +2.5. I like the +2. If they lose by 1, lose by 2, you still get that push. But I ultimately actually think Oklahoma State wins this game. I think they kind of assert themselves top of the Big 12. We'll see what happens with Kansas State later. Kind of that trio of Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, with UCF kind of lurking in the wind. But I like Oklahoma State in this one. I think Ollie Gordon gets it going a little bit. I think there's a few things they've been holding back in the playbook for this game, knowing the importance that it's going to have. And in terms of a conference matchup, I think this is the best conference matchup that we've had thus far in the football season in terms of the ultimate outcome that it will have for the actual conference title game.
Yeah, I can see Oklahoma State winning because Utah's defense has had, like against Utah State, some issues, and like you said, with his hand having a laceration and it being his throwing hand, you imagine he probably won't be 100% in this game. I haven't released an official prediction for this game yet. That'll be up tomorrow. But I initially leaned Utah just because I trust Kyle Whittingham and I think he's one of the best head coaches in the country. And Utah looks to have a better rushing offense than, well, they had last year or even the year before that, possibly. I mean, Micah Bernard's done very, very well, and they have an underrated receiver core with Dorian Singer. But like you said, and you know the Big 12, with Oklahoma State at least, better than I do because, well, Texas played there just last year. But it's a road game, new environment for Utah. I mean, we have Cal traveling to Florida State, Utah traveling to Oklahoma State, USC traveling to Michigan, and Tennessee traveling to Oklahoma. And all of those are conference games. Those are not non-conference games like they would have been a year ago. They're all, it's crazy. And
it's a crazy time in college football.
Yeah, it is. But wow, four units. I mean, I can see it. I mean, if you're confident Oklahoma State is going to win, they're an underdog. And if Rising is, I don't know what threshold he needs to be at, but I mean,
Utah also has a history of making you think that a player is going to play and then last second pulling them.
Oh yeah, you can't trust Whittingham with injuries.
You cannot trust Whittingham with injuries. They did it with Rising in the opener last year. Everyone thought coming into the season, Rising's ready, and then he ended up sitting out the whole year, right? So I question how. I mean, he's practiced, so you can see him on the practice field. I question when you need it, when it's 3rd and 7 and you need it. Does one slip off because he doesn't have the right feel in his finger? And in a game that is a 1-point, 2-point spread, that stuff matters. If this was a Utah 35-point spread, it wouldn't really matter, right? Because if one gets away, fine, you're the dominant team, you're going to beat them. These teams are so evenly matched. Oklahoma State has such a good offensive line. You know that they're going to be able to run the ball. You know they're going to score some points. They looked so big, strong, and fast to start the season, especially at the wide receiver position. Owens, number 10, that's a name to know for Oklahoma State at wide receiver position. People will be very surprised that, oh, wow, this dude looks like an NFL wide receiver. That's because he is. And they're gritty. It is very difficult to beat Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy. All that dude does is win 10 games every single year. And I like them in this one.
Yeah. And in the preseason, I looked at, Brennan Presley and Rashad Owens and then even DeJon Stribling. Like they have an underrated receiver core.
Very underrated.
To really help out Alan Bowman. And yeah.
That's the thing. You don't need Bowman to be Superman. He just needs to not make mistakes and be accurate with the football. And they have an offensive line that can give him time. They have a running game that can force people to really open up a secondary because they have to respect Gordon so much. And I mean, Presley is Presley's like a jackknife, right? He's that Swiss Army knife that it's like 3rd and 5. How is he wide open for 6 yards? Every single time, that type of guy. So I like Oklahoma State in this one.
Yeah, the spread, by the way, just moved down on ESPN at least to Utah -1. Like it just slipped.
Ooh, that could be right. That could either be buyback on Oklahoma State. The Sharps kind of let Oklahoma State get to that 2.5 number. Maybe even if they have relationships with the books, we're able to get that +3, and then put a lot of money in. So now the public will come in on Utah, or that's injury news on Rising. That someone at the sports book knows something that the public does not know yet. That's one of the two.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean it's basically a pick 'em, and then you got the home team who's also has a good coach compared to the road team and all the newness. Yeah, I can see that. You may actually change my mind on this game, but we'll see tomorrow.
Come to Bald Father Bets. Come on, Sam. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys check out his channel again at Bald Father Bets. He posts videos of really any length and also community posts just documenting his picks and explaining why. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it a lot, Adam, and we'll have to have you on pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. This was great. Again, I love your channel, Sam. I love the community that you've established here. The people that are in the chat, the people that comment, just kind of the back and forth. It's a lot of fun. Some playful jabs here and there, but really respectful. Everyone knows everyone has their teams that they're cheering for. And yeah, would welcome anyone from Sam's channel. Please come follow Bald Father Bets. Like I said, we're 60, 40, and 1 so far on the year in 2024. 32 and 18 in college, and 28, 22 and 1 in the NFL, right at that 60% winning mark. So the biggest thing about it is we're having fun. We have a community talking about the lines, going back and forth. But while you're having fun, we can make you a little money too. So come over to Bald Father Bets, and we'll get your picks right for the year. But yes, Sam, let's do it again. Next week, I think a little off. I'm going to the OU Auburn game. It'll be my first time ever going to the Plains.
Oh, wow.
Going to Jordan Hare Stadium. But yeah, maybe the week after, something like that. Would please have me on again. This is always fun.
Yeah, of course. Well, we'll see you soon. Thank you very much, and let's chat later.
Thank you. I'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. Well, look, I've been working very hard, and I've been pushing myself. So I know that I said that we'd be getting to previews after this, but this went fairly long with Adam, and I enjoy that a lot. And I have some homework I have to get to, and I'm tired. So I'm going to get to the homework, and then the videos that I was going to do in the live stream, I should have some energy to get to those either late tonight or very early tomorrow and schedule them out for Thursday. So thank you very much for coming on. We're going to end it right here. And in the future, I'd say expect these streams to be about closer to, an hour like this one is rather than an hour 30. It's just easier on me. I know it's easier for you guys. I really enjoy the community that we've built here, and I can't wait for us to continue. Make sure, again, if you haven't already before I go, to check out Chris Gates' fitness page and the offer that he has. Sign up for our Discord. You just click the link again in the pinned comment, and you'll join our Discord. And also check out my Patreon page if you want to support the channel. It's better for me if you support through a Patreon membership, because Patreon takes less of the revenue you donate than YouTube does. But it is what it is. Whatever is easier for you works. Have a great day, guys. We will be back very, very soon. See you guys later.